Democrat Michael Futrell served in the Virginia House of Delegates from 2014 to 2016. He joins us now from Washington. And I'm joined here in New York by Republican political consultant Shermichael Singleton and Democratic strategist Antjuan Seawright. Welcome to you all. Michael, I'd like to start with you. You said last night this yearbook page, quote, isn't a one-off from Governor Northam. What do you mean by that?
Well, we've seen a history with the governor. We saw what happened during the election where we had Justin Fairfax removed from the campaign mailers. We saw where he dressed up as his quote-unquote favorite governor, who was also a slaveholder. We've seen the Coon Man. We've seen the picture, and it's not just even about the blackface. For me, it's more so about the posing with the KKK member. And we continue to see a pattern here. And when you're following a pattern, that pattern tells me that you have now lost the faith of many people who believed in you. And that's why he cannot successfully lead this Commonwealth as we move forward. So
I just want to be clear here, Michael. You're suggesting that Governor Northam, in order to win his election, played on racial fears in order to get to where he is. Is that what you're suggesting?
That is not what I'm suggesting. The only thing that I'm doing is pointing out the facts of the things that we've seen. You know, I've been able to build a great relationship with the governor throughout the years. But this situation that we have in front of us, and when you put all of those things together, what it does say is we cannot allow you to be the one that brings us together. Because if you think about what happened in Charlottesville, if anything like that ever happened again, how can he come out and say that we need to heal, we need to come together, that the people can believe in? And if you remember the hurt and the pain and the anguish that people felt after that situation, what we do know is there's no way that he could be the person to guide us forward. I appreciate Governor Northam as a man. I know him well, but he cannot lead us as we move forward.
So Governor Northam's would-be successor is facing his own scrutiny. Justin Fairfax, the lieutenant governor, denied an allegation of sexual assault Monday. What needs to happen, Michael, next in order for Virginia politics to recover after everything that's been going on?
Well, you know, we hear a lot of the things that people are saying. There's been a lot of accusations. Are things coming from the governor's office to try to save himself in a news cycle? Is this coming from potentially future opponents? Was this the attorney general? So many people are saying so many different things. But our first step here is we've got to get to the point where we can heal. And for that to happen, Ralph Northam had it right, according to the stories, that first night when he said he thought that he was going to go ahead and resign. And had he have done that, we would already be on the path to healing. But until that happens, we can't move forward. So if you see the marches and the rallies that are being put together right now, this only gets worse for everyone involved the longer that he continues to stay in office. So we were talking off camera about the moment that we're in right now. And I want to put up this quote from the Washington Post's Daily 202 on Monday. Quote, "The deafening chorus demanding Ralph Northam's resignation suggests that Americans could be on the precipice of a Me Too moment for racial politics." I want to start with you, Michael, and ask you, Antjuan and Shermichael as well. But Michael, do you see a Me Too style movement forming here? Well, you know, this is something that we've dealt with for many, many, many years. You know, it's always interesting, the process that we go through. And if anything, even if you connect this to national politics and the things that we're seeing with President Trump, as people are talking about it, you know, for so long, people have said that we may be exaggerating. And what it's doing is it's bringing it to the forefront of what we go through. And again, as I go back to Governor Northam, this is not to say Governor Northam, this is his beliefs. But what it does say is we can't allow you to lead if we can't believe in you. And when people were shocked the way that they were on Friday, he's lost all of that support. So with that, we need to be able to move forward.
What do you think, Shermichael? Are we at the beginning of what was a Me Too moment, but now when you look at the racial politics in this country?
No, I think so. I think many African Americans have reached a point where they are finally saying our grandparents, parents, great-grandparents may have been forgiving of many of these things, but we are no longer willing to be as forgiven. When you think about a just society means that all people are to be treated equally, as according to the Constitution. of this country. But we know indeed that there are people who don't believe in holding everyone to the same accountability, if you will, that they would like for themselves. They don't believe in treating people with respect or viewing people with dignity as the things that they would, again, maintain to be treated for themselves. And so, again, I think a lot of African Americans are looking at this moment and looking at other similar moments across the country, from Florida, from Georgia with Stacey Abrams, and saying, you know what, we are no longer going to tolerate this from any of the two political parties, and we know that we now have the political capital to do something about it.
What do you think, Antjuan?
I think what African Americans have realized, especially in this generation, my generation, is that we're no longer on the menu. We're finally at the table. And when you're at the table, you have decision-making abilities. And we've also found our voice. And we found that we can be effective, and when we're together, we're strong. And I think that's what you see happen in Virginia. I think that's what you've seen happen in a lot of places. I think we're figuring that out in our Democratic primary. It's not a coincidence that you see this fight for the African American vote in the Democratic primary. So I think you're finding that. But I will say this: I won't call the governor racist because I don't know his heart. But what I will say is part of being a leader is being able to be effective. I don't think going forward he can be effective in holding the Commonwealth together. I'm not a Virginian resident, but I do know people there, and I know where they are on the edge of their seat. The other thing is, in politics, it's about a game of addition and multiplication, not subtraction or division. What we've seen now, because of the governor's action, we've seen a lot of subtraction, we've seen a lot of division, and I just don't think, from a leadership standpoint and from a governing standpoint, he can be effective going forward.
You mentioned the Democratic primary, so 2020 presidential hopefuls were quick to rebuke Governor Northam and call for his resignation. I want to play some of what Democratic Senator Cory Booker said on CBS this morning.
I do not think he has the capacity to serve Virginia right now. He should recognize that. This is not about him. This is about what's in the best interest of the Commonwealth, and he should step away from that job.
So, Antjuan, what kind of test is this for Democrats, and what can we expect to see next?
Well, I think this is a test of standing for what's right. And for the presidential candidates, I think we have to call balls and strikes, because one of those persons, I believe, will be the next leader of the free world. And so I think we have to set the standard, and also set the standard for Republicans, because racism is not partisan. These incidents are not partisan. They impact all of us in a very real way. I think now's the time for leaders to step up and lead, and I think I'm so proud of what we've seen from potential candidates and those who put their name on the dotted line of calling these things out, but also saying, you know what, how we chart our path forward will say everything about our party and what direction our country will go.
So a recent CBS News poll found that 63% of Americans disapprove of the president's handling of race relations. Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan asked President Trump about that number, and here's his response.
What has happened is very interesting. The economy is so good right now. You saw the jobs report just came out, 304,000 added jobs, which is a shocker for the month, a shocker to a lot of people. They thought it was going to be half that number. The African Americans have the best employment numbers in the history of our country. Hispanic Americans have the best employment numbers in the history of our country. Asian Americans, the best in the history of our country. You look at women, the best in 61 years, and our employment numbers are phenomenal, the best in over 50 years. So I think I've been given a lot of credit for that. And in terms of race, a lot of people are saying, well, this is something very special, what's happening.
All right, Antjuan, I know you want to weigh in, but Shermichael, let me start with you.
Okay.
How do you assess his response there?
I mean, it shows just how out of touch the president is with race in this country. And just because a person has a job, or just because unemployment numbers have decreased somewhat, does not mean that a person of color, particularly an African-American person, will not still face racial prejudices and other aspects of their lives. And that's what the president, again, doesn't understand. Why? Because he has had, for almost all of his life, the great privilege and advantage of not having to know what it feels like to be a part of a marginalized and disadvantaged group. And what he at least alludes to, I would argue, in his comments, is that he still believes that he is only the president for the folks who voted for him and not the president of the entire country. When you win at that level, you're not just the president of the red states or the blue states, but the entire country. And this president has struggled with trying to bring the country together, and some would even argue he doesn't even have the willingness to do so.
The president brought up as part of his answer, we didn't hear it there, and his supporters would say, look, he also signed criminal justice reform, Antjuan. He also worked on a piece of legislation that we know has the ability to affect the lives of African-American men. What do you say to that?
He signed the First Step Act, meaning it was the first step, and I will give the president his just due, as we say in the South, for what he did. But let me couch this a different way. My leader, Mr. Clyburn, says it this way: our lives are the sum total of our experiences. Mm-hmm. I am the grandson of sharecroppers from South Carolina. My parents did not go to anybody's college. I tell people, forget about trying to make ends meet. They were putting two ends together, hoping they would meet. So I hear the stories about how people have been treated. So have we made progress in this country? Absolutely. But we are one or two clicks, tweets, or pieces of legislation of turning the clock back, whether it's voter suppression, whether it's cutting budgets from things that really have a deep, dire impact on African-American voters or African-American communities, or whether it's just simple how we address people of color and how we talk to them. We are very, very close to sending that clock back, and that's my biggest fear as a 33-year-old young African-American in this country. And if you get stopped by the police, he and I have deep concerns versus people who do not look like us. So when the president says things are fine and we're doing toe testing, we're taking victory laps, I'll ask him to think about the experiences of those who do not look like him.
What are your thoughts on this, Michael?
Well, I completely agree with everything the gentleman just said. The thing that we realize, if you haven't seen it, felt it, or gone through it yourself, it's very tough for you to truly understand what it is we go through. So when you hear the president say things like that about the unemployment rates, and, you know, we've consistently seen, even since President Barack Obama, that our trends have been swinging up when it comes to that. But there is also a difference between having a job and being underemployed. And that's not something that we continue to have conversations about. So even while people do have jobs, the question is, are they able to feed their families? And when you look at things like this government shutdown and the people that are impacted, and you hear statements like, well, you know, most of those people who are impacted are Democrats. It goes back to what we just got done saying. You are the president of the United States. And so when I have issues in my community where I have to bring the community together to host a furlough workers workshop so that way families can have food to be able to take home, you know, these are the things that I think about when I see it. I'm not just thinking large numbers, I'm seeing these individual families. So while we do appreciate and we can give a round of applause to the president on some of those things that he has done, like criminal justice, what we realized is in this day and age where we're still talking about firsts and things like that, we've still got a long way to go.
Long way to go. It's so important to continue this conversation. Michael Futrell in D.C., Shermichael Singleton, and Antjuan Seawright, thanks to you all.
Thanks
really
so
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you for having me.